Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 703. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about churches and monasteries, dumplings and cheesy bread, marionettes, and the oldest wine tradition in the world as we go back to the Republic of Georgia. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Georgia. I'd like to welcome back to the show Tommo and Megsy from foodfuntravel.com, who have come to talk to us about the Republic of Georgia. We're going to start with in Tbilisi and head east. Tommo and Megsy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us, Chris.
Hey, always glad to be on the show.
And Tommo and Megsy Williams. I didn't say your last name.
Yes.
That's not a
Yes, we got married since we last spoke to you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I didn't mention it, I think, because I'm not used to referring you as the same last name. And Tommo and Megsy were on the show once previously.
I think
talking
twice.
about,
Maybe it's twice.
Cebu in Philippines, and where was the other one?
The Yucatan,
the Yucatan.
in Mexico.
Oh, in the Yucatan.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. The more recent episode we have on the Yucatan and Merida. Excellent. Well, why are we talking about the Republic of Georgia?
Well, we actually moved to Tbilisi about a year ago. It's our third time living here. The second time we were here, we got married here.
We did.
And then a few months after that, we decided we actually wanted to live here more permanently, and now we do. So we used to live in Merida, Mexico for a while. That's why we talked to you about that a couple of years ago, and now we live in Tbilisi. So that's...
And when you say permanently, this is permanently from the context of a travel blogger, which means more than a couple months.
I think this is more permanent than
More
other
permanent than
previous
that. Okay.
decisions. Because,
Excellent.
already almost a year, and we've got no intention of leaving at all at this point.
And why should someone else come to the Republic of Georgia?
I would say, the main draw here is, firstly, it's quite undiscovered. It's a little bit out of the way for most travelers, but it's been getting a huge amount of press internationally recently, especially because of the food and the wine. It is the birthplace of wine, according to the most recent archaeological evidence.
And that's 8,000 years old.
8,000 years ago, they found pottery stained with wine from 8,000 years ago. So definitive evidence that it was actually going on and people were making wine and drinking wine.
Interesting. And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
So obviously there will be some wine to try, but there's also a lot of history here because we're right in the east meets west sort of area. We are nestled between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, with Russia to the north and Turkey to the southwest, and Armenia and Azerbaijan to the south and the east. So there's been a huge influence from all these different cultures. For the itinerary, we're going to start off in the capital, Tbilisi, and it is quite a big city with a lot of history. So this was founded in the 5th century AD. So it has been around for a long time. There's lots of different things to see. When you fly in on the first day, the flights that come in from the US and via Turkey are all quite early morning arrivals.
I would call
4
them
a.m.
stupid o'clock.
Yeah, stupid o'clock. So we'd say the first day that you're going to be here, it's probably going to be a solid half day of recovering and sleeping. And then you have a half day in the afternoon to go out and see some things and then enjoy the evening. And then have a second day in Tbilisi. It's quite a fun city and there's a lot to do here. Day 3, we'd be heading east towards Kakheti, which is the primary wine region. But of course, it's also a very historic region that's changed hands between different cultures, the Persians, the Arabs, and of course the Georgians at the moment. Firstly, we'd be heading to the hill town, it's a mountain town of Signagi.
The city of love.
The city of love. It's actually a town, but it's very beautiful. Nestled on a little hilltop with views down the valley and towards the Caucasus Mountains in the distance. The next day, staying in the wine region and moving to Quareli, which is right down in the valley. It's like a very central part of the wine region, down near where the river valley runs through, where the river runs through the Alazani Valley is the name of the valley. And then day 5, heading north through the valley towards Talavi, which is the capital of the Kakheti region. Kakheti actually used to be an independent state for a while as well. It was separate from Georgia, but now it's integrated with Georgia. Day 6, we'll be heading back towards Tbilisi, through Tbilisi, and then there's a number of important historic sites just north of Tbilisi, which include the ancient capital before Tbilisi, which is called Musketa, and also Uplistike, which is an ancient cave town slightly to the west of Musketa, and also towards Gori, which was the birthplace of Stalin. And there's also lots of wine in that area for people who are real wine lovers. You can have some different wine region. They've got different grapes in all these different regions, so it's definitely things to explore. And then heading back on the 7th day towards Tbilisi so that people can catch their flight out. Or if people are flying out of Kutaisi, which is the other main airport, then heading from Gori towards Kutaisi, which is about a 3-hour drive. So there's a couple of flexible options, but yeah, that's the rough itinerary.
Excellent. Well, let's go back through that in more detail. So before we get into that, we should say that although it may be undiscovered, it's not undiscovered on Amateur Traveler, as we've done 2 other episodes. The first one at least 10 years ago, and the second one more recently. And so we'll put links to those in the show notes. And Tommo and Megsy have listened to the most recent one of those too. So some of the things that are mentioned in there, they may skip over. We'll see how that works for time. But you started us in Tbilisi.
Yeah, so let's talk about maybe doing a bit of a walking tour. We'll just cover some of the attractions. A few of these were mentioned in the other previous episode, but definitely worth mentioning a few of them again, just briefly, so that people get a sort of general feel for it.
Yeah, so I mean, generally in Tbilisi, it's this really vibrant city to visit. You can go out almost any time of day or night, and there'll be people out and about doing stuff in a good, wholesome way. There's restaurants that are open, there's bars that are open.
Sort of 24-hour dining, really.
It is a little bit.
Sit down anytime and
eat. Food and wine is exceptionally important culturally here. And as Tommo mentioned earlier, it is surrounded by all of these really strong cultures, but when you actually come to Georgia and come to Tbilisi, you'll realize just how unique the culture is here as well. So there are definitely influences from those other places, but it is very, very strongly Georgian to the core.
Yeah, they have their own alphabet, one of the unique alphabets of the world.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
So some people say there has some similarity to Armenian, but when you look at it, it really doesn't. like the symbols are very, very different. So it's a completely unique alphabet and lots of unique words, and the way people pronounce stuff. It's one of the harder languages to learn, for sure.
Well, and one of the things I've always had trouble with Georgia on the Amateur Traveler site is I take every country and I lump it into a continent. And Georgia I have placed in Europe. But you look at a map and it looks like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I think Georgia in particular would consider themselves Europe, and I think visiting here as a country, I also would, just architecturally and culturally, I would consider it Europe as well. Definitely like Eastern Europe. But as you said, if you look on a map, you would probably consider it to be Asia. I sometimes have a hard time putting my time zones in. I can never find Tbilisi in a time zone thing when I'm changing from different countries. It's because it's always like nestled in Asia, but I think I would definitely say Europe.
Well, and if we head straight south, we'll get to Armenia, Iran, and Iraq. And so Armenia, I would also be one of those that I would put in Europe culturally, but Iran and Iraq, I would certainly not. Azerbaijan is just to the east and Turkey is just to the west, but it's the Asia part of Turkey. It is one of those, as you say, regions where cultures meet.
Yes. And I think, at least from that perspective, it's because of the Orthodox religion. Orthodox Christianity first founded in Armenia in the, I think, 4th century or late 3rd. Oh, yeah, 4th century.
4th century.
Earlier than that.
A little bit earlier.
Armenia was the first Christian nation, the first nation where Christianity became the main religion. So it predates Rome becoming Christian in the 300s.
So Georgia was the second country. They took on Christianity not too long after that.
Yeah, the estimate is somewhere between 319 and 326 AD. Different people have different opinions. And that was when Georgia took on the Orthodox religion. Probably I'll mention a little bit about that when we talk about some of the important attractions that relate to that a bit later on. So let's talk about a couple of the Tbilisi attractions that people should see. I'll rattle a few of the ones that were on the previous podcast just for updates, and then some other things to do in Tbilisi that weren't mentioned before. I think the number one thing, if you've only got a day or so, day and a half in Tbilisi, probably straight up to visit Narikala Fortress. It's a 16th century fortress that's located right above the old town, on the hill just behind the old town.
You can't miss it.
You can't miss it, yeah. Once you walk into Old Town, you will see this huge fortress on the hill with a church inside the fortress with the top of the church poking up above the walls. Originally, this would have been a 4th century fortress, but that was destroyed many times. And the current one is believed to be 16th, 17th century. Once you climb up there, you get a fantastic view of the whole of the old town. And that's really the main reason to go up there. It'll only take you maybe 20 minutes to walk up the hill, or there is a cable car if you want to take the cable car instead. And then you just get these amazing panoramic views where you can see all of the different landmarks of the city. So it's sort of a brilliant starting point for any sort of tour there so that you can get your bearings.
I would just say, depending on who is deciding to go up there and your fitness level, one thing to take in mind, it is very steep getting up the hill. So if you are feeling like a little bit more energetic, you may want to walk up the hill, but maybe take the cable car back down, just because the risk of slipping is there. So make sure you wear like really good footwear going up there if you are going to be walking either up or down. Or you can just take the cable car because it's really affordable, maybe like $2 per person. To go up and it's very affordable to take that option as well.
Yeah, but I mean, you might be waiting in line for like 30 to 60 minutes during the summer when it's busy season.
Yeah, and
like
sadly,
that, so.
I would definitely say that it's not wheelchair accessible.
No, absolutely not.
Well, and you mentioned the summer. When would you recommend we come? Obviously, not in the middle of a pandemic when we're talking to you now, but when everything gets back to normal and people are traveling again, when should we go to?
Okay, so summer is the absolute peak season, and when you look at the stats, July, August are very, very busy, significantly more people than the whole rest of the year. So personally, I think coming in May or June is the best time, or September, October for the harvest season if you're a wine lover. But if you're here in May, also for wine lovers, but also because the weather's a little less hot in May, they have the new wine festivals, so all the wines from the previous season are all being released. And they've got lots of festivals around the city. So yeah, that's my top tip. Everyone comes in July, August, but it's really hot. I wouldn't recommend coming July, August.
Okay. Excellent. What else should we do in Tbilisi?
So from there, you can walk down the hill or get the cable car down if you want, and you can go and visit the sulfur baths. This is definitely one of Tbilisi's most famous attractions. Actually, the name Tbilisi, it came from the Georgian word tipili, which means warm and refers to these warm natural springs that were found, and that's why they actually founded the city there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they found this sulfur spring and they went, this is great. We can all have baths.
There's an old story about the king was out hunting and he shot this bird and the bird fell down. And when I think he was out with his dog, found it, they saw that the bird had cooked. And he was like, ooh, I know what this means. And so pretty much he moved the entire capital to be at Tbilisi to surround these sulfur baths and so that they could all have nice warm waters to bathe in. And definitely that sort of Turkish influence, of course.
Yeah. You've got public baths there, which are super cheap. I mean, you can go there for maybe $4 or $5. They are segregated and normally nudity is expected. Or you can get a private bath with a group. And those private rooms can be anything from sort of $20 to $100, $150, $200 for a private room, depending on the quality and the size of room you want. So it can be very affordable if you've got like a group of 4 or 5 people to get one of those medium-priced rooms and you're only paying $10, $12 an hour to have this private room. And then you can decide if you want to be naked or not.
Yeah, you don't have to get naked in front of your friends if you don't want to. But hey, if you do want to, go for it.
And close to there, you've got the old cobbled streets of the old town. You've got Kote Afkazi Street and the Maidan, which is like the central sort of market square, old market square. Lots of cobbled streets, lots of souvenir shops, lots of nice restaurants around there. Not necessarily the best restaurants, but a nice location. We'll mention some better restaurants to try in a little bit. From there, because everything's really very close in walking distance, from the old central square there, you can actually see straight across the river towards Meteki Church, which is on the cliff above the river on the other side. This is believed to have been the first church that was built in Tbilisi in the 5th century, although the structure that's there now really has no relation to the original structure. And they can't actually prove that there was a church there in the 5th century, but that's what legend says. And it was actually built by the founder of Tbilisi. So you can walk across there, and then you can walk down some other attractions that were mentioned before on the other episode, through the park to Rike Park and the Peace Bridge. And the Peace Bridge is this crazy modern art sort of installation that crosses the river.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of installations that was put up and everyone saw it as an eyesore, and now they've kind of grown to love it. It's kind of got that, it's not as famous as the Eiffel Tower, of course, but the locals hated it at first. But it's all made of glass and it's meant to represent the transparency between government and the people.
Huh. I think it's attractive, but
I think it's pretty too, but they hated it at first.
It's a strange, very modern piece amongst these old Orthodox churches and statues and cobbled streets, and then there's one thing, and then they built another very modern installation that was never finished opposite it. It makes the skyline so recognizable, though. Like, once you've been here, you'll never forget the skyline because it's so odd that it's got that there.
Huh.
But yeah, you can walk over the Peace Bridge, which is probably going to be very busy. If you're there in summer, it's like elbowing your way past people almost. But you can go across the other side, and there's a couple of other interesting attractions. One that you haven't heard about before probably is the Rezo Gabriadze Marionette Theatre. So this is a bit of a newer installation. They've built this marionette clock tower, and every hour or so the figurines come out and do various things in a clockwork fashion. And underneath it, you can actually book tickets and go and see this puppet theatre. Some of the performances are in English, and some are not in English, but they have subtitles. So you can ask in the box office there. So that's definitely like a more quirky, unusual sort of attraction that's right in the downtown. And right next to that is, for those people who are looking for a bit of a church trip and looking to find some interesting churches, the actual oldest surviving church in Tbilisi is right next to the puppet theatre. This one, although it's technically not as old as the other one that I mentioned, this one is 6th century, but this one's actually proven 6th century. The foundations are 6th century. It was constructed then, and some of the upper parts have been reconstructed since. So that's actually, and it's like down this hidden little alleyway under an arch, and it's not somewhere that people really know is there. Whereas the other church I mentioned is this huge church up on a cliff that everyone sees. So yeah, you can see
what is the name of the oldest church? The one you're
It's
referring
called Anchiskate Basilica. So it's not quite as impressive as some of the other ones, but that is because it's actually older.
Yeah, but if you're a history buff, it's definitely worth going and checking it out.
And it's a quick little 5-minute stop if you're walking through there anyway. It's quite a small building.
Okay.
So that's a little sort of more of a hidden one. People walk past it and I think they just assume it's a little church in the corner and there's no point going to see it. And actually, it's the oldest church in Tbilisi.
Huh.
So that's a cool little spot. A couple of other places, just quickly to finish up with walking around Tbilisi. You can head to the more modern part of the city, where you'll find more Russian architecture, neoclassical buildings with columns and arches and things like this on this wide street called Rustaveli Avenue. And that's just a few minutes walk from the puppet theatre that I was talking about. And you can walk all the way up there. There's lots of more modern shops. There's an old opera house that I think is about 100 years old or so.
Yep, and you can definitely go along and see shows there. The ballet often performs there. A lot of people went at Christmas time to see the Nutcracker, and apparently it was wonderful. And so, yeah, you can definitely go and see some culture. Also, the Georgian ballet, if you ever happen to catch them while they're in town, is an absolute must because Georgian dancing is very unique and very exquisite. And if you do get a chance, I absolutely recommend seeing some form of Georgian dancing, whether it be the National Academy or just some people at a local restaurant. It will wow you, regardless of who's doing it.
Well, it's very athletic, if I'm picturing the right kind. I had a coworker who was a Georgian dancer.
It is athletic. There is a lot of jumping and there are swords.
Yes.
And fire
And
sometimes.
fire sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fire I haven't seen. Okay, we were probably doing it inside, so.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's inside. They have them in like little pots and they put them on their heads and all this sort of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
Health and safety here isn't quite the same as in the US, so, they could still dance around with fire in restaurants and things. It's fun.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Okay, a couple of other little things, and then we'll talk about a bit of food and nightlife. The Dry Bridge Market is one that wasn't mentioned before, and this is an old flea market. I think it started sort of just before the end of Soviet times here, which was 1991 when the Soviet Empire collapsed. Essentially, people were very, very poor, and they just started going to this area called the Dry Bridge to try and sell anything they had to actually have enough money to pay for food and all these sorts of essential things. And it ended up turning into a full flea market with antiques from everything from like vinyl collections of Queen and
it's a bric-a-brac market for sure. But there's also some local artists that do go there to display their works. So you can go and see local artists, painters who have done, interesting paintings, or they do a lot of felt work here. So you can go and get nice shawls or actual art hangings that are made of felt and stuff like that. So definitely worth going to check it out. If you do want a souvenir, it's a good spot to go.
Yep. And my last little tip, there is a metro system, a very limited metro system in Tbilisi. And it's very, I don't know, you call it ostentatious almost. It's got a strange grandeur to it.
You will take a step back into yesteryear, almost like Soviet yesteryear.
Yeah.
And it's deep, deep down. So you take one of those escalators that just keep going down, 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 down. And you're like, where are we going? but once you actually come out into the metro station, you're like, wow, this is really impressive. And it's just kind of cool to ride around on the metro. It's very affordable to do so.
Oh, yeah. It's like 20 cents US per ride on the metro for up to an hour and a half. So just to go ride the metro, just to see a couple of the stations and then ride back to your hotel or whatever. It's
just for the experience.
Yeah, if you've never been to a Soviet country, you've probably never seen an underground subway stations like those. It would be quite unusual. So just as a little on the side sort of tip.
Excellent.
All right. So, I
And
mean,
we're
with
gonna
all
give
of
some food tips, and then we'll head out of town.
Yes, I think so. Because with all of those things, that's almost
so
a day
much
and a half.
walking. You've got to be hungry.
Okay, we'll mention a few important dishes and then a few places that you can go and try them, and maybe some options for going out in the evening if people want to do some nightlife as well. Megsy's favorite is khinkali.
I love khinkali. So if you've never heard of khinkali, it is like a soup dumpling. So similar to your xiaolongbao that you might find in China, but with a twist. So they did originally say that this was probably an influence from Mongolians coming through this way through like Silk Road trading and stuff like that. But they have done their own twist on it. So what you have to do when you bite into this dumpling, because they're quite almost like the size of your palm, they're quite big. And you have to bite and slurp at the same time because there's all this good, lovely, meaty juices in there.
Like
that
a
you want to
soup dumpling.
Exactly. So you got to slurp it and eat it at the same time. It can get very messy, but it's delicious. And they do also do it with their local cheeses here as well, mushrooms and potatoes. So there's quite a few different fillings you can get inside the khinkali. But one of the unique things about khinkali in Georgia that I've never seen with dumplings in any other country is they put pepper on it. And it really makes it sing. I couldn't have khinkali without pepper. It's just too weird now.
Yeah. Gives it a little kick. It's great.
Yeah.
You could bring it to the table and then you have to sprinkle pepper on top. And you have to eat it with your hands. If you start eating with a knife and fork, and I've seen tourists do this, and it just, everyone goes, oh my, what are you doing? This is so bad.
Or with a knife and fork.
With a knife and fork.
Oh no, it's so no.
Because if you put a knife into that, all of the juice inside will just spill onto the plate, and you've just got a plate full of random juice that you can't eat. And it's terrible. So don't do that. So this is the top tip for foodies coming here. Use your hands. Maybe look at a video online first how to eat these things because you will mess it up the first time. Otherwise, most people do. And yeah, black pepper. You got to sprinkle that on it. The other sort of national dish of Georgia is khachapuri, which is a cheese stuffed bread. The most famous one of these that you might have seen in magazines is sort of shaped like a boat. It looks a bit like a Turkish pide, but sort of fatter and chunkier.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen that. But
often with an egg on the top.
Yes.
That's
an egg on top and a large chunk of butter.
Okay.
They just
Didn't
put
know about
that
the
on the
chunk of
top.
butter. All right.
And then it just melts all over it. But that is actually just one variety. There is probably about at least 12 different varieties of khachapuri.
Depending on the region that you're visiting, you'll find different varieties depending on what the local produce is. Yeah, in Tbilisi, naturally, you get that sort of concoction of everything from the regions you can find here. So pretty much anyone you can try. But most people coming to Georgia for the very first time want to try the ajuruli, which is the boat one. It's getting quite famous in places like New York. I think there's a couple of Georgian restaurants that have opened in New York that have definitely made it hit the map in popularity.
So yeah, that's khachapuri ajuruli is the boat-shaped one. And then there's all these different khachapuris. So they're all different shapes with different fillings. Some of them have potato and cheese in. Some have egg in, which is quite unusual. Khachapuri is definitely a dish you got to try. No matter which one you try, I think you're probably going to be quite happy because, you know, it's cheesy bread. You can't really go too wrong.
You can't go wrong with cheesy bread.
Exactly. One of the other most important ingredients that they use in a lot of food here are walnuts, and they make this walnut paste that they mix with a selection of local spices. And so, yeah, it's ground down into this paste that they then mix with different things. So some of the things they might mix it with is maybe they will grind it up with some beetroot or spinach to make a dip. And then other times they might stuff it inside a fried eggplant and they roll that up. That one's called badrijani. And the other one with the spinach or beetroot or different vegetables where it's like a dip is pikhali. And those are really good sort of starters. And sometimes they mix it up with a salad. So they have like a cucumber and tomato fresh salad and they mix the paste with that. So that walnut paste is like an essential ingredient that they use in all different dishes.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people are really pleased to find out when they get to Georgia is how vegetarian friendly a lot of the menus are. You can definitely be vegetarian here and eat so many amazing dishes, and you don't have to eat the same thing again and again. There's a good variety of vegetarian food here. Vegan, not so much, because as we mentioned, they do love their cheese and their butter. But vegetarians can definitely be very happy here.
Another vegetarian dish, very quickly, alaji is like a polenta mixed with the local sulguni cheese, which is, you could probably compare it to a sour mozzarella cheese, sort of a bit similar to that. It's like this crazy thing. You put your fork in it and you can lift it up and it will stretch like half a meter off the table before it breaks. It's amazing fun. So if you see that on the menu, order that just so you can play with it.
It's great for your Instagram stories.
Yes. Also, lobio. Yeah. Lobio is a beans dish. It's like a national sort of beans dish that they mix with various herbs and spices. Sometimes that's mixed with ham, sometimes it's not. And it's sort of like a bean stew. And the final one I'm going to mention is their sort of national dessert is Churchkella, which is made from grape juice, because of course this is a big wine producing country. They have a lot of grapes, and they take that juice, they boil it with flour until it goes into a thick paste, and then they string walnuts onto a string and dip that in the paste, and then hang it and leave it to dry. So it looks sort of like a walnut sausage, but it's a dessert.
Okay, I'm trying to get a mental image or Googling quickly. Okay, got it. All right.
It's good. It's sugar free, so it's all natural sugars from the fruit. They don't add any extra sugar to it. So it's a very healthy dessert. It's not super sweet. It's quite a mild sweetness. So some people might be like, oh, I'm used to eating cheesecake and chocolate fudge brownie. This is not a dessert. But it's a very, very popular sort of national dessert here.
Huh. Okay.
So that's some really good dishes to look out for.
One of the things that has definitely changed since the last episode about Georgia is some of the restaurants. Georgia in the last couple of years has really blossomed when it comes to restaurants and gastronomy and everything. So if you're going to come and visit, there's some restaurants that you definitely should have on your list. These do require reservations. So most people you can call and be like, do you speak English? And if they don't, they'll find someone who speaks English to take your reservation. But it is getting more and more easy to just have someone straight away that speaks English that will help you with your reservation. So the first place is called Shavilomi, and it was actually opened by a famous chef here. Did she win MasterChef, or she runs MasterChef? She's got some affiliation with Georgian MasterChef. And she does a lot of traditional dishes with a twist. She goes out into the mountains and will collect mountain cheese, and then will incorporate that into her khachapuris. And yeah, it's a really, really wonderful restaurant. I guess you would call it
a touch hipster.
Yeah, it's a bit
Inside,
of a hipster
it's
place.
got like an old grandma's cafe vibe, but in a cool way. You know, with like a piano on the side and soft furnishings that are all coloured, and then
nothing really matches.
Nothing matches, yeah, but it's done well in a nothing matches sort of way. And then outside, they've got this beautiful garden with murals on the walls and lots of trees and bare brick.
Great in the summer.
And really, really beautiful in summer and spring and also autumn, because it's not very wet here. It's very dry here. So al fresco dining most of the year is pretty good. It only really rains occasionally. So
yeah. And so after you finish having dinner there, which is always a very lovely experience, it's really not far away from one of the hippest places in town right now called Fabrica. And Fabrica originally started out as this hostel, but it's exploded into it's a really funky modern place with graffiti on the walls and all that sort of, definitely that hipster vibe. But outside in the courtyard of Fabrica, away from the hostel, there's a lot of businesses that have opened up. So bars, restaurants, different things. And there's this whole courtyard that you can go out. Once again, it's lovely in the summer because you're outside, and there'll be lots of people there to meet and mingle with. And you can just go and grab yourself a drink there after you've had your lovely dinner at Shavilomi.
Yeah, that sort of space is focused more on people 18 to 40. I've got another space we'll mention in a minute that's for people a little bit older than that. So yeah, if you're a bit younger and you're looking for that sort of experience that's going to be partying till quite late at night, that's one of the places to go at the moment. That's a hotspot.
Definitely.
Wine Factory is a little bit more sophisticated. It's the same sort of concept of having a number of different restaurants and wine bars all in the same place with lots of outdoor area for people to socialize and mingle. They've even got sort of street cart type dining. They've got some international food as well as Georgian food. And that's on the other side of the river in Rustaveli. I mentioned Rustaveli before, where the opera house is. That's, more of a laid-back evening where you have a nice sit-down dinner, and then you can just socialize at one of the cocktail bars or one of the wine bars.
Not so much of a party zone. So if you're looking for a party, hit up Fabrica. If you're looking for a bit more of a relaxed place for drinks and a really great atmosphere, we love Wine Factory. And you can have everything from a great cocktail bar, there's a wine bar, there's a craft beer place, and then a whole bunch of other restaurants and everything in between. So it's a really cool place to go and hang out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also,
looks like there's also music spots there also, from what I'm seeing.
Yes, they do have some live music in some of the places, but it's on like an infrequent schedule, so you'd have to check which nights it's actually going to be on. But speaking of entertainment places that you can guarantee to see some Georgian singing and dancing every single night of the week, one of our favorite places to recommend is called Georgian House. It sounds a bit touristy. On the website, it looks a bit touristy, but believe me, it really isn't actually that touristy. And you'll find about 60 to 70% of the patrons are Georgian. And it's just one of those places that has really good food. It's really nice atmosphere. The service is actually above average for Tbilisi, but the prices are below average for Tbilisi. So it's a really good value for money, but you also get this dinner show where from 8 p.m. you've got 4 Georgian singers who sing this amazing harmony singing called Georgian polyphonic singing. It's a beautiful sound. I mean, obviously people will have heard barbershop quartet before, but throw away any sort of thoughts of barbershop quartet. It's quite different from that. It's more complicated. It's more interesting. I love it. It's a unique sound. It's very hard to describe it. You have to come and hear that. And then you will get an opportunity to see people jumping around and hitting each other with swords whilst they dance in front of the tables. As long as you get there by 8 p.m., the dance show starts very promptly at 8 p.m. every single night of the week.
And that's completely included. So it's not like it's an additional fee for you to go and see the show. You can just go there for dinner. Make sure you get there about 7:45 and the show will start at 8 p.m.
Yeah, super affordable. I mean, overall, the whole country is very affordable. I would say you could have a nice night out at Georgian House with table wine, all the entertainment, and some very good dishes for under $20 per person. Okay. So it's really very, very affordable for a very nice venue. One other thing to mention in terms of food, because we said khinkali is like the national dish. Now, it's massively controversial who has the best khinkali. I don't think anyone will agree. Like, if everyone you ask will have a different, like, this is the place for the best khinkali. This is the place. So, yeah, for those soup dumplings, our number one at the moment, and I think this does change occasionally, even in our own minds, is called Amorame khinkali. So if you want to go and have khinkali, although you can have that at pretty much any restaurant, this one in particular, make a note of it. It's got a weird spelling. Although it's called Amorame, it's spelled Amorame. So like Amorame, but it's Amorame. A tiny little hole in the wall place, so you do need to reserve a table if you want to guarantee to sit down. And I think they have the best because they're handmade dumplings rather than machine pressed. So extra special.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that people won't have to. I'll do the work for spelling it for you.
Awesome. Did you want to mention a couple of roof bars as well, or?
Yeah, so definitely if you are here in those spring, summer months, you probably want to get a great view of the city. And there are some really incredible bars that you can go to. You've got to walk a little bit up the hill to get to a couple of these, but it is absolutely worth it while you're there. So one is Point Hotel Tbilisi or Art Cafe Home.
Yeah, so two different places.
Yeah, they're two different places, but they're close to each other.
Yeah.
So they're both very close to the old town. Very non-touristy places to visit, mostly because people don't want to haul up the hill to get to it. But they have these incredible roof bars. Do need to walk up to them, especially like Art Cafe Home. Once you get up the hill to this place, then there's like no elevator or anything inside these buildings. So
then you got 4 floors to walk up as
well.
So
just you got to be in a fit kind of mood. But the views are 100% worth it. And there's this interesting thing with Georgian culture that regardless of what celebration they're having, if it's a wedding, if it's a birthday, if, I don't know, a graduation, someone bought a new car, they seem to like to let off fireworks for the drop of a hat here. So you can very often just be sitting on these rooftop bars and get a fireworks display out of nowhere. And it makes it pretty special.
All right. Well, and we are 2 days into a 7-day itinerary. We probably need to pick up the pace a little bit.
The next section is a little quicker to get through because there's less detail for each section. It's more about going and exploring and seeing things and enjoying the history and the countryside. So yeah, let's move on to wine country, Kakheti wine region and the Alazani Valley, which is the main river valley that runs through Kakheti. Yeah, it's a separate state to the east of Tbilisi. It's going to be about a 2-hour drive from the city to get to your first port of call, which was Signagi, which I mentioned before is like this village on a mountain. It was actually built by the last king of Kakheti before Kakheti became part of Georgia, King Erekle. And he built this fortified town as a summer palace because it's out of the valley, so it's a little bit cooler. And from here, you've just got these incredible views across the whole valley and all the way to the snow-capped tops of the Caucasus Mountains in the distance as well. as well as it being just a really cute little cobbled village. So it is one of the top attractions. There's always a lot of people going through during the day. So if you stay there overnight, which is what we recommend, then it's much quieter at night. So if you want a peaceful evening after a sort of busy day walking around there, or maybe visiting a couple of wineries nearby, then Signagi is definitely a good place to go. Then we're going to drive from Signagi on the next day, day 4, right into the heart of the Alazani Valley towards Quarelli, which is on the other side. So this is just in the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains. And this is sort of like the real epicenter of wine production in Georgia. So there's lots of different wineries around this area that you can visit, and also lots of different historical sites, such as the Necresi Monastery, which is a 6th century monastery complex right up on the hill. You can hike up to this. It's a very steep road to get up there, or there's actually a 4x4 taxi that operates during high season. They actually block off the area. You can't actually drive up there yourself in your own vehicle because this road is so steep that people break
You'll
down.
probably break your vehicle.
Yeah. Even in off season.
It's really steep.
We went there in off season when the barrier has been opened, and our driver tried to get up there, and we made it about 3/4 of the way up before he was like, nope, you can get out now and you can walk the rest of the way. So yeah, you need to take one of these 4x4 taxis or walk up there.
But the views are sensational. It's just breathtaking.
Yeah. The monastery complex is quite small. It still has the beautiful Orthodox style, and it's got the terracotta roofs. It's beautiful, but the actual view from the monastery is really the main attraction of going up there, because you can see in both directions all the way along this massive valley, which is over 100 kilometers long. So sort of over 60 miles long. Really, really incredible. And then you've got all of the different segmented fields in the valley with all these different wine production is going on. Really quite an amazing spot to go to. For an alternative on that day, if you don't want to hike up to a monastery, there's also a nature reserve further south called Lago Deki Nature Reserve. It's a 94 square mile reserve that's actually the first protected reserve of Georgia since 1912. So back when Georgia was part of the Russian Empire, before the Soviet period even. And it's, really big area, lots of forests of maple trees. You can go and try and spot some wildlife. Apparently, they have Eurasian lynx, grey wolf, and brown bear. Fortunately, I've never run into any of those. But if you could see them from a distance, that would probably be pretty amazing. But apparently they still roam in that area because this national park is connected to the Caucasus Mountains, where there's just no inhabitation at all, because it's like 5,000 meters. I don't know what that is in feet, but
roughly 15,000.
15,000 feet. So yeah, this is the barrier between Georgia and Russia. So that is why no one actually lives there, and it's very hard to cross. So that is what has kept Georgia sort of separated from Russia. That's like the natural boundary. Another alternative option, if you don't want to go and see more monasteries and churches, if you're a bit churched out by this point, you can go and enjoy some nature instead. Or of course, lots of different wineries. I think one of my favorite wineries in that area is a very small sort of personal family winery. And this is an important thing you can do in Georgia that's very different from going to wineries in France or Australia, or I assume California as well. But you can actually go and visit someone's family home, and there's a lot of these family home wineries, and you can basically just rock up on the door, or maybe call them in advance or send them a message on Facebook just in case to make sure they'll be home. And you can pretty much have lunch with a family at their place and drink the wine that they made that season. And all of those things, they normally cost you maybe $15 or $20 to sit down and have a lunch and drink wine with a family, which is amazing. So it's probably one of the most unique parts of being here. There's so many of these places. One of my favorite ones that in that region close to Quarelli is called Vako Orkwashvili, which no one will be able to spell. So I will send you the spelling for that so you can put that in the show notes. Just the most enthusiastic winemaker I've ever met.
Varko's such a character, and you can't not fall in love with him. He doesn't speak a lot of English, if any, but he communicates in just passion and excitement for his wine, and it's infectious, and you just can't help but just laugh and drink and enjoy spending time with him. He's wonderful. His wife does speak English, so there is someone there that can help translate, but quite often it's just fun to just roll with whatever Varko's doing. It's a great time.
So there are lots of like larger wineries as well, which are maybe easier to visit in some sense. But these family wineries are really what the essence of going to Carchetti is for me personally, because obviously this natural wine tradition, they're making the wine without additives. He's not adding sulfides either, although some of the large production, they add sulfides because they store them in bottles, but he is not adding sulfides. So this is 100% natural wine. Just they put the grapes in a pot in the ground called the cuevri, and they let it sit there to ferment, and then they let it age for a few months, and then they get it out and they put it in jugs and they drink it. And that's it. It's an annual cycle, and it's just like it was 8,000 years ago to some extent. It's quite amazing, really. He makes a couple of different wines. He makes Saperavi, which is a red wine. It's like the most famous red grape in Georgia. And he also makes a Rkatsiteli, which is the most famous white grape. So they're very common in that region to find those two types of wine. There are lots of different wineries to find. We actually have a whole article on this. I don't think we're going to find enough time to talk about them. We've got at least 20 different wineries listed that are places that people should visit, non-commercial places.
Well, and did I understand that you are now, when you're not in lockdown, doing tours of the region?
Yes, we've actually started doing tours. We've probably been to maybe at least 30 wineries throughout the Carchetti area to try and hone down on the ones that we think are sort of like the most interesting, to try and give like a balanced perspective of here's sort of like a medium-sized winery, here's like a tiny home winery. And so, yeah, we've got different ones. This other winery that people should look up is Akido, Akido, a little bit easier name to spell. This one in particular, they have this early 20th century cottage. It was one of the original cottages from the little village of Icalto, where the winery is based. And essentially they managed to preserve the cottage. They don't live there now, but they've turned it into sort of like the wine tasting room. And they've got a little cellar there where they make some of the wines, as well as having some other wines that they make off-site. And then you can go into this place and you can do cooking classes outside with views of the Caucasus Mountains right amongst the vines. And also the wines that they're making are very refined. So they're making this, the amber wine, which I don't know if we'll get time to talk about that either. We've got some resources on our website that actually explains all these different wines. So instead of being a white wine, it's made from white wine grapes, but because they put the skins in with the wine when it ferments, it actually goes to this orange amber color. And that's like one of the most traditional wines.
Blanc de Noir or a blush wine, but there they call it amber wine. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it has some similarity to that. But they believe that this would have been one of the oldest ways of making the wine, of course. They don't, unlike the European method where normally they would separate the skins and just use the juice to make wine. Here in Georgia, they still put the skins in.
Everything goes in.
Even like stalks and seeds might go in as well.
Okay.
It's quite unique.
It's quite fascinating wine. If you haven't actually tried it yourself, you can get it in the US, so I would highly recommend looking it up and seeing if you can find some traditional Georgian wine that's the white grape variety, like
Katsiteli.
Katsiteli that I mentioned before is the most famous one.
So one of the things that I really love about Hokkaido is that you can get a little taste of everything there. So if you want to do a Kankali cooking class, you can do that with the village ladies there. Or if you want to just sit and drink wine, and he has very good wine, and enjoy the view, you can do that as well. The host speaks excellent English, and he's really, really great at explaining the house and the food and everything. And the purpose of the house is just give a glimpse of the way that they used to live. So it's got a lot of the old furnishings and stuff. So it's sort of like stepping back in history, and you get to see the way that people lived in the olden days. Very simple, very...
Families all lived in the same room, basically.
Exactly. But then you also get to drink this exceptional wine and then eat the kankali that you've just made. And it's this whole experience, but still has this real homely feeling to it. It doesn't have any sort of tourist vibe to it at all. It just seems really comfortable and really welcoming and homely.
Yeah. It's the hospitality is very authentic there. You really feel like they want you to visit. They want you to be part of the Georgian experience. It doesn't feel like it's been orchestrated in any way. And not just at Hokkaido. I mean, at almost any of these smaller independent wineries, they really just invite you in. And it's actually quite hard to leave. So when we have tour guides, when we have tour guests come, And they say to me, surely we can do wine tastings at 4 or 5 wineries because, you know, you'll have a few sips, you try the things that you want to try, and then you move on to the next place, buy a couple of bottles. No, you can't really do that here. It's almost impossible for me to take guests to more than 3 wineries in a day because you will be given more and more wine, and they'll just keep giving you wine, and then they'll bring the spirits out, and they won't let you leave. So if you're going for a full wine tasting experience in Georgia, do not expect it to be anything like a wine tasting experience you've had in any other country. It's a marathon of wine.
And they're all very, very proud of what they make and want you to know about it and want you to drink more. And it's, as Tommo said, sometimes you just can't get away from them. You're like, no, we have an appointment at another place. And it's, I love it,
and
though.
I did want to clarify one thing for my American listeners, because we just ran into one of those issues where, you know, 2 people separated by a common language. Homely in British English and Australian English, therefore, means domestic and familiar, and in American English, it means ugly.
Oh.
So
What?
you were using the British definition there of intimate or friendly, rather than the American English definition of homely, which we would say homey instead of homely.
Ah, okay. I did not know that.
like
Just to
comfortable
clarify,
and sweet.
we were talking about something
And
that was cute, not something that was ugly.
no, not at all. No, it's a very sweet place to visit.
Yeah, for sure. If any of your listeners want to check out some more wineries, because there's so many that we could talk about, they can go to foodfuntravel.com/Georgia, and all of our resources are there, including our wine guides, and they can also get a copy of our Introduction to Georgian Wine PDF that they can download, and then they can read that before they come, so they can learn all about the wine production and what the sort of wines to look out for in each region are.
Well, and I'll include a link in the show notes to the 20 best vineyards in Georgia article from your website.
Oh,
so
great. That would be fantastic.
Excellent. Where else?
Okay, so I think there are more places to cover. All right, I'll mention a couple of the ones very quickly before we run out of time, because then we've got one other day that we need to get onto. So, the Alvaredi Monastery. And there's been a lot of monasteries and churches in this, because that's what Georgia's all
It's
about.
all churches, food, and wine.
Churches, food, wine,
and hiking.
When you
monasteries.
see pictures of Georgia, you are probably looking at a picture of one of those 3. Or a mountain. Mountain would be the other thing that it's known for, but yeah.
Well, with this picture, you will have a beautiful monastery that is right in front of the Caucasus Mountains. So it is nicely picturesque behind it with these mountain tops and snow. And it's called Alvaredi Monastery. And now this one, very specifically for the wine region, it is actually the oldest continuous winemaking production in Georgia. Since 1011 AD, they have been making wine at this monastery.
But it's hard to get your hands on it.
You can buy it in Tbilisi. There's a few places to get it. It's very expensive. You can't do wine tastings there unless you're like a political figure or someone famous who's paid a lot of money to do some special wine tasting. It is not open to wine tasting. It's a very small production, very special production. But you can visit the monastery. And from the outside of the monastery, I said you got those amazing views of the mountains behind it. And it's a fortified monastery. So it's got all of these fortified walls around the outside. And then you've got all of the roofs, the colored roofs, like blue tiling on top of the church inside.
The frescoes.
The frescoes inside the church as well.
If you've ever been inside an Orthodox church, you'll know that they tell a lot of their Bible stories through the paintings on the walls. And so there's still a lot of these old churches here that have these frescoes that still have quite aged. They've been on the walls for a very, very long time without being revamped in any way. It's still the authentic fresco. And it's really quite beautiful to see.
From the Alvaredi Monastery, you're only about a 30-minute drive from the capital of the Kakheti region. Although it's called a capital, it's only got about 45,000 people in it. So it's a very, very small capital. This is the old capital called Talavi. And this is where you'll probably stay overnight because there's lots of great hotels. Or you could also stay in a wine hotel instead. There's lots of guest houses where you can stay with the family. But if you want something a little bit fancier, then in the city is normally where you find a better selection of sort of mid-price hotels instead. But this city is sort of raised up on one side of the valley, the opposite side to the mountains. So pretty much any place you stay in, if you're on like the second or third floor, you're going to get a view over the rest of the town because it's quite low rise and you can see the mountains. So you got good views pretty much from anywhere you stay there unless you're on the bottom floor. It's pretty fantastic.
Very cool.
All right.
And
so
then we've got one more day.
We do. So this moves us on. In the morning, you drive back towards Tbilisi, and out to the north of Tbilisi, we're heading for more monasteries. But this is probably the most important monastery in the central eastern Georgia region, is the Jivari Monastery, which is a UNESCO site.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the place where the Saint Nino, who's very, very popular here, everyone loves Saint Nino, she came back to Georgia with the word of Christianity and was telling all of the pagans that this is the way that we shouldn't live anymore and we are all going to be Christians now. And she made a cross out of 2 bits of wood and she put it up in front of where this pagan monastery was. And she was like, this is now a house of Jesus instead. And so if you actually look at a Georgian cross, it's quite unique. If most traditional crosses are very rigid in the way that they look, but because St. Nino used just whatever pieces of wood she could find to put this cross together, the Georgian cross actually kind of bends a little bit.
Yeah, wilts is a good
little
word for it.
So you've got your solid upright one, and then the second one that crosses over kind of, wilts a little. And it's very unique cross that I've never seen anywhere else in the world, actually. And that particular place has been there since the 4th century. And it's actually, the monastery itself is still the original from the 6th century, is it?
I think, yeah. So there was a wooden structure built in the 4th century when Christianity was founded. And then around about the 6th century, they built the stone structure. And although repairs have been done, it's the original sort of design. Also, it's right on the top of a hill. And this is what Georgia does really well. They always put their monasteries and churches in these fantastic locations where you've got amazing views.
Well, I think back in the day it was to stop armies coming and taking them out, but
It
now...
was for defense, but now it's for great views. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't planned for tourism, no, but it's very, very good and fortuitous that it is like that.
And if you have any doubt why they put them in the locations, think back to the one that you covered last, which had these, crenellated walls that was clearly built as a fortress.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, Jivari, isn't fortified, but it is up on the hill above the ancient capital of Mosquito, which was the old capital that was the capital when Christianity was founded there. And you've got fantastic views from the Jivari across to Mosquito and the 2 rivers, one river coming down from the north and one river coming from the west, which both meet directly below where the monastery is. So you see these 2 different colors of river sort of combine, which then flows further south down towards Tbilisi.
Yeah.
And it's also sunset facing. So you can get up there at sunset and have a nice look. So you could either stop there on the way from Tbilisi or you can stop there on the way back if it's summer and you're coming back in the evening. And then you can get those really wonderful sunset views. A couple of other places to talk about in that area just north of Tbilisi. Uplistike, the old cave towns, at least from 1000 BC. It's an ancient settlement that is carved into the rocky hillside. So all of these different caves have been carved directly into the side of this hill. Another place with great views, once again, because they could probably then see hordes of armies approaching and be ready for battle. That's about an hour's drive from Jivari Monastery to the west. And that is definitely, that's actually one of my favorite spots.
It is really incredible that people... You know how you go to these historic places and you just imagine people walking around back in the day, and when it's like these buildings that have been carved into the rock face, it just blows your mind thinking about people like kings and queens and all their servants living there and walking around, and it's all very well laid out. If you get a guide that can tell you about what all the different things are, it's just so impressive that it was made. And then the way that you get out to go back to the car park is through this underground tunnel that would have been one of their emergency exit tunnels to get out. You go down into this cave, and it's just very, very cool. Once again, very good footwear if you want to go and explore that area. But yeah, it's really, really wonderful place.
Interesting.
I find it, because all of the Orthodox architecture does have some similarity. So you've seen a lot of the same sort of architecture as you move around the country. Whereas here is one of the few places in sort of central and eastern that's a completely different experience. It said at least 1000 BC, if not before, they started carving those caves. And it actually became a city almost of 20,000 people at its height in the 11th century. And then the Mongols came in and basically destroyed it after that as well.
And said, hey, but we brought Kinkali, so...
Yeah, they brought
peace.
Kinkali, but they killed everybody, so that's not necessarily a good thing. So yeah, this was actually like the capital of Georgia as well. They've had a lot of capitals because they've been invaded so many times, and they had to keep moving. So once Tbilisi was taken over in the 7th century, they actually had to retreat back to this Ublistike cave town, and they were there for a few hundred years before they recaptured Tbilisi in the 12th century, I believe. And then the Mongols turned up, so yeah, it all went pretty bad. This is actually a wine region as well, because most of Georgia is wine regions. So you can
go into an apartment in a Tbilisi home and it'll be a wine region.
Yeah.
People make their own wine in their apartments. So
there's a guy down the street from us who we just were walking home one day, and he's like, "Do you want to come to my basement?" And we're like,
You wouldn't want to say yes in a lot of capital cities, but in Tbilisi, you can say yes to some strange guy offering you drinks in his basement.
His wine was quite good, and it's literally like 50 meters from our apartment in Tbilisi. It's just this guy on the street with a little table going, "Come in and drink wine in my basement." It's quite crazy.
Well, it feels like we have finished the itinerary, have we?
There's so much more that you can do, but yeah, with so much more. But yeah, that's some of the really important places you definitely should make sure you visit to get this wonderful mix of if you are short on time, and you can just go and get the wine, you can get the nature, you can get the history, the culture. It's the perfect little itinerary to get just a little bit of taste of everything. And I think that you'll probably fall in love and want to come back and explore so much more that Georgia has to offer.
Well, like so many episodes, this has definitely shoved Georgia a little higher on my list of places to go. So that's always what I'm looking for. As we go to wrap this up, you're standing in the prettiest spot in this part of Georgia. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Okay. I mean, for me, I think probably Signagi.
I was going to say
Signagi as well.
Yeah, okay. I love Signagi.
So Signagi is the
we're married for a reason
that we mentioned.
Yep, hill town that you mentioned on the way over to the valley. Okay.
It's called the City of Love, but it's
you
also
didn't mention that. So why is it called the City of Love? What's the...
They just call it that.
Well, they have a modern reason for this.
Oh, because there's a 24-hour chapel.
It's the first place in Georgia to have 24-hour weddings, so it's the Vegas of Georgia.
But not in a tacky, trashy way.
I mean, it's not, you won't get married by Elvis or something. It is like you can go to the town hall 24 hours and there's someone in the office there that can marry you in the office.
No, it doesn't have a look of Vegas. A lot of white buildings with red tile roofs. A little more picturesque than Vegas, I'd say.
Yeah.
But if you stand up on the hill behind Signagi to the south of Signagi, you can look over the town, but then over the town into the valley, which is a good 400 meters below the town, and then beyond that to the mountains. And especially if you come in winter or spring and there's a lot of snow sort of in the distance, it's even more spectacular.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in the Republic of Georgia.
There's some really bad food delivery translations.
This might not be the best for a travel show, but yeah, some of the translations of Georgian to English are funny.
It's just such a difficult language in general, and Translate really has a hard time with it. So sometimes you just get the weirdest translations and you're like, oh my goodness.
I was trying to order this pork, I think like a pork barbecue, and the translation was pig karaoke. It's like, what?
I wouldn't say that's necessarily only in Georgia. If
no,
you have
true.
a chance, Google Chinglish menus find the article on Amateur Traveler of a hilarious but delicious restaurant we found in Shanghai.
For only in Georgia, I would say, like, I don't know if it doesn't make me laugh, but it does make me love living here. We mentioned before about the polyphonic singing. Where you can go and see those shows. But actually, it's a tradition for people to just do that when they're out at dinner with friends and family.
People here can sing. Huh.
Yeah. So if you go to some bars and restaurants that are outside of town, none of the ones that we mentioned, they were all more in-town ones, but some of the very local spots, then you can actually just be sitting there and suddenly 4 or 5 people just stand up at the table next to you and start singing in perfect harmony. And you're like, oh, wow. And it is one of the most fantastic things about being here.
Huh.
And, yeah. But we don't publish those ones because we want to keep them special. If you email Megsy directly, megsy@foodfuntravel.com, we might send you some details if you're actually coming here. If you're not definitely coming here, then don't worry about emailing us. But if you're on the way here and you want to hear about some of those places, we've got some secret tips.
Good to know. Well, and speaking of tips, if we wanted to send people to the best article on foodfuntravel.com, we're already going to link to the 20 wineries in Georgia. Where else should we send them?
I mean, I think the best place, just because it's a hub for everything, is foodfuntravel.com/Georgia, because that has got all of our articles are all there, and you can also put your email address in and get our crash course to Georgian wine, so you can learn about what amber wine actually is, because we didn't have time to really explain it.
And you also will find there we have our own podcast, The Dish, where we talk about food, and we have a
mention that.
Yeah,
you have started a podcast since we last talked.
Yeah,
and
so
enough, I think people are not going to be surprised that it's about food.
Yeah.
So that one's actually a 2-part episode. There was so much food to talk about, we had to do it in 2 parts. So you can definitely find the link to that and have a listen to all of the incredible food that you can find here in Georgia.
Yeah,
and a belated official welcome to the land of travel podcasters. So,
yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Foodfuntravel.com/Georgia podcast takes you straight to those episodes, or you can just look up on your podcast app, The Dish Food Travel Show, and that's going to be us, and then you can subscribe. We'd love it if you subscribe. And of course, if anyone's coming to visit here and they want us to show them around and take them to some of the secret spots, we do run tours here, and you can go to eatthistours.com, and we do food and wine tours. Or more
Excellent.
like Eat This. It's more like a 80s, 90s reference, but it works both ways.
Our guests again have been Tommo and Megsy Williams, and congratulations again from foodfuntravel.com. And thanks again for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for the Republic of Georgia.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure coming on the show.
We're not going to talk too long because this has been a longer show, but there's one piece of news since last week's show, and that is that the Amateur Traveler trip to Turkey is now officially off here in 2020. And I think you can probably figure out why, because of the pandemic. And so we will tentatively be pushing that out for a year and potentially then pushing the other trip that was scheduled for 2021 out a year also. If you're interested in the Amateur Traveler trips, go to amateurtraveler.com/trips and join the Facebook group where we're talking about all of that. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got some great shows coming up on the South Down Way in England, Saudi Arabia, South Dakota, and Oslo, Norway. And thanks so much for listening.